You're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup with me, Roisin the Cleric.
And me, Paul Brophy. Tonight, Roisin, we continue our special looking at the local elections which are happening on the 7th of June. Tonight, we're delighted to be joined by Fine Gael councillor for the Tullow electoral area, Brian O'Donoghue. Brian was first elected in 2014 with over where he received over 1,000 first preference votes. He was re-elected in 2019, and he has been a two-time Cathaoirleach of Carlow County Council. Brian was qualified as a journalist and has worked for a number of local and national radio stations. So, Brian, you're very welcome to the Irish Political Roundup.
Evening, Paul. Evening, Roisin. Thanks very much for having me.
Brian, you were first elected in 2014, which is a decade ago. A lot has happened since then. Um, how have things changed on Carlow County Council in those 10 years?
Well, no grey hairs to report just yet. Anyway,
Yeah.
couple of extra pounds. I can see just looking at myself here, got a bit heavier with the stress of it, I suppose. But yeah, look, the landscape has changed massively in 10 years. Some of it really, really positively. And some of it, there's always going to be challenges to use that unfortunate cliche. But like some of the positive things, I remember in 2014, every single time you approached an official in the council looking for funding for a project, the answer was just constantly no. And in 10 years, more and more frequently, the answer is, if not yes, it's, well, maybe in a few months' time, there's more funding coming for this, there's money coming for that. And not to be anyway crass about it, but the money that's been thrown at rural Ireland over the last 5 years in particular is absolutely enormous, to the point where I think some rural councils are finding it difficult to spend, partly because it's very hard to get staff. That's
Right.
that's the nature of full employment. And I know I work in the private sector as well, full time, and I know my own company. Last week or week before had 12 interviews lined up, and I think only 3 people turned up for interview because there's a job in the country for anyone who wants one. And there's another
Yeah.
stark change in the 10 years. We were
Yeah.
my first canvas card said stability, jobs, growth. And we certainly have stability. There's a job for everyone who wants one, and the growth has been enormous despite threats of Brexit, despite war in Ukraine. The growth that we've had is
Yeah. So it's been a busy and a very and a positive sense in that sense. But you said Carlow, like every county, has its ups and downs, its challenges. And just for our listeners, Carlow is split into three electoral areas. You have Tullow, you have Carlow Town, you have Carlow Municipal District. They also elect their own mayor, and you have the Bagnallstown electoral area, and you have 18 councillors representing County Carlow. And I think you did a video on TikTok. Depending on where you're living, you could potentially, depending on what side of the road, you could have 3 or 4 people living close by, and one could be in one electoral area, one could be living in another, one could be in another. So it's up depending on how the boundaries fall.
Yeah, no, and a shout out to all the people in Tynock there, because I think Emma Byrne might have commented on my video that even though he was living in very close to the village of Tynock, he couldn't vote for either of the 2 people who are running from the village, because literally the road divides in 3 and you could be in each of the municipal. So it's the lines have to be drawn somewhere, and that's kind of the make up of that. But yeah, and for anybody who wants to check out my video, you can get me on Instagram. Councillor Brian O'Donoghue is the handle.
Yeah. We'll definitely include your links in the bio when this video it is up. And so Carlow as itself, as a county, it has 2 third level colleges, which are very, very important. Is Do you see is funding kind of distributed fairly? Like, in in some counties, you have the main center, the city or town, and then the rest just kind of are getting crumbs, or do you kind of spread the funding out as evenly as you can?
Absolutely brilliant question. I think the large urban centres are naturally going to always have a perceived level of more funding, but I would usually make the point that generally speaking, proportionally, it usually works out. In the first term, when I got elected from 2014 to 2019, we only had 2 municipal districts. Carlow and Tullow was all joined together, and Munaviog was on its own. So you just had the 2, and you had 10 councillors in Carlow, kind of versus the 8 councillors in Bagnallstown. And when you think about it, Carlow and Tullow being 2 of the large population centres in Carlow, Kilkenny, never mind just in the county.
Yeah.
And I remember we used to always have the guys in Munaviog saying, we're not getting our fair share. And that argument was very easy to make because of the population divide, where most of the roads were, you name it. Now with 3 municipal districts, and in the last 5 years, because of the level of funding and the different funds that are available now, I think there's been a really good spread. Carlow Town got 20 million euros in the URDF, but in the RRDF, like Rathvilly on its own, got 227,000. Tullow got 100,000 to do a town centre development plan. So, and Munaviog the same. So, I really think there's been a huge effort to spread the goods as much as is practically possible. But there has to be a realization as well that you've got to your capital town, your county town has to thrive, and it has to be. It's always going to get that little bit more money, and I have no issue with that whatsoever.
And housing is a massive issue across every county in Ireland. How does Carlow Town fare as regards, the building of private housing, public housing, and addressing its waiting list?
We had our Tullow municipal district meeting just this afternoon, and housing came up, and in Tullow, in the Tullow MD, we're going to meet, and in Tullow Town in particular, it looks like we're going to meet our social housing targets within the next, I'd say, 18 to 24 months, which is incredible. Just in my own village here in Rathvilly, we're currently building 18 social units, and there's 10 private units being built. Carlow Town, a lot of houses being built. One of the issues we have in Carlow Town is the land bank has been, in terms of land that the council can use for social housing, is really depleted at the moment. They've had to put out several calls looking for land, and it's been very slow to come. I do think we will reach a point where social housing targets and we will catch up on kind of the demand there at a point in time, and I think we actually start needing to shift the focus as not away from that, but to put equal focus on starting to zone land for private housing as well, because at the moment, part of the reason prices are so high and why it's so unaffordable for so many people on medium to low incomes is just simply the price of the houses. And the best way to decrease the price of houses is to have more supply. And there's a huge cohort of people who don't qualify for social housing because they're on enough money or they're on too much money, and the banks won't look at them for a mortgage. So one way the councils can help is to start zoning land appropriately for housing and allowing for development to happen there, and the more houses we built, the more affordable they'll be for everybody.
And what do you think of these affordable housing schemes where the county council would take a stake could take 25% stake in a house, which in turn would reduce the price of a house for the individual buying? Some people said when you look at them, it makes sense, but when you dig into the detail, they're not really that affordable.
Yeah, and one of the issues that this came up at our meeting today, one of the issues is the threshold in Carlow. I think it's 325, and the average price of a house in Carlow is not 325, so it doesn't match up to what the need is. And in saying that, the initially when the affordable housing schemes were being kind of suggested or pushed, it was looking like Carlow wasn't going to qualify because the breakdown of where the needs was nearly split in half between people who were going to qualify for social housing and people who actually were going to be able to afford to buy or build. Cush Dara is our exemplary scheme. It's a mixture of social and affordable, and some of the new schemes are being built in there. I think every single metric or every single scheme we can develop that helps anybody get a roof over their head is a good scheme. And at the same time, I don't think any one scheme is going to be perfect. I don't think any mortgage is perfect. You're signed up for 25, 30 years, and it's a huge commitment, and there's all that to it. And that I don't want to in any way belittle the issue that is housing, but whatever scheme helps, we should do. And where there's issues, you can adapt them for the next scheme that comes along. But the simple answer to all the housing issue for me, if you really want to simplify it, is we just need to build more houses and build them as quickly as possible.
And your new leader and of Fine Gael, Simon Harris, and new Taoiseach, he set a target of 250,000 houses over a 5-year period. Now I've been listening to some commentators saying, that figure alone, that 50,000 a year, that will probably be just to stand still, which is a lot less than what the current targets are. Do you think he's right to kind of set that target of 250,000 over 5 years?
Yeah, it's I mean, in the same way the speed limits on the roads are a limit, not a target. I think with our housing targets, they should be the minimum. And 250,000 is a really good minimum. I think everyone really quickly jumped on and said, wait now, 250,000 5 years, that's 50,000 a year. Sure, that's not going to happen. But I think his point, and I think he clarified it afterwards, was, okay, next year it might be 35 and the following year it's 40, but then it goes to 50, 55. And by the time you get to the last year, you've maybe built 70,000 or whatever the case may be. And with more apprentices coming on, and maybe with people returning home from abroad to join the labour force, hopefully that's where the possibilities are. But I mean, all you have to do is go onto any of the political parties' websites and scroll through the houses they all say they'll deliver. So if every single one of them say it's possible to build between 200,000, 250,000 homes, whatever the target is, as long as we're trying to build houses, I'll support any method,
And they say now too, Brian, that the middle income earners are the new homeless. I just what you said, they're either over the threshold for the county council social housing, and yet they can't even, they are under the threshold for social housing, for the affordable housing. So and they're the middle income earners are the new homeless now, sofa surfing and staying with mommy until they're maybe 40.
Well, and I don't mind telling people this, but I'm 36 years of age, and I was very unlucky. My mum and dad passed away when I was younger, 20 and 24. Sorry. Oh no, I don't mind, but it's all good. But I guarantee you, if my folks were still alive, even though I'm married now and have a baby on the way, I guarantee you, if they were still alive, the chances of me not being, I'd still be in this house. So sometimes I say I envy people who still get to live at home, and that's all well and good for me to say. When you're trying to get some freedom and have your own space, I can only imagine the restraint of that, and trying to get up and go every day must be really difficult. I do think, if we tell people, and especially young people, if we tell them every day they'll ever own a home, we'll completely knock the spark of or knock the desire to want to own a home out of them. And I think I meet so many people who I can't get a mortgage, and you say to them, well, have you tried for a council mortgage? And number one, they've never heard that there is one. And whereas people in kind of say my folks' generation, or maybe this generation just after that, a lot of people would have built their houses via council mortgages. It wasn't that everybody got mortgages from banks at the time. It was council mortgages that built so many houses around the country. And a lot of people then, okay, the council mortgage might be a little bit more difficult to get in terms of, there's got to be checks and balances. You're dealing with public money, and it can be as onerous as getting a mortgage from a bank, but the council mortgages are there to help the people maybe who, in their younger years had that credit union loan, or that they maybe were a bit slow to pay back and there's a bit of issues, but the council can make an exception to a credit rating and that kind of thing. And that's a really positive way. But I don't think enough people, number one, apply for those. Number two,
how do you apply for those, Brian? Is there
all
a criteria that you have to follow? Do you have to be turned down 3 times by a bank before you can apply to the county council?
Yeah, so it's a minimum of 2 refusals from lending institutions. Don't have to be banks; they can be building societies and that kind of thing. And I think a lot of people don't realise that there's a huge amount of mortgage lenders out there that are not Bank of Ireland and AIB. You've got Haven, you've got, you name them, that offer mortgages, and brokers are really, really good as well. I had to buy half my house. So myself and my brother were left this house, and I had to buy him out. And I sat down in front of a bank manager, or one of the main pillar banks, and I was told, no, you can't have a mortgage. And I was like, but I'm only trying to buy half a house. And I was just told point blank, no, will not, wouldn't entertain me. Went to a broker, and I had 4 or 5 different mortgage offers. So, I cannot tell you how disheartening it was to, and especially, local councillor, pillar of the community, to go into a bank that's a pillar of society and be told, no, more or less be laughed at. Go to a broker. They're worth, and a lot of brokers don't charge a fee. That they get paid by the lender who ends up giving you the mortgage. So it's really good way of going about it. But to answer your question, Roisin, about how you apply for the council mortgage, some of the criteria are get 2 refusals from 2 other lenders. You must have, if you're a single person, your income must be below 50,000, and if you're a couple, your income must be below 70,000. Those thresholds might have just increased recently, and you check that out. And you must be a first-time buyer, unless you are going through separation or divorce, then you can make an exception in those cases. And obviously your credit rating and all that gets checked, and all that. But what I'd say is, and the great thing about a council mortgage, you can go in and sit down with the housing loan officer, and they will say, okay, yeah, look, you've got you're saving €200 a week there, or €200 a month. You're going to need to up that to 350 for 6 months, and then come back in and show us those. And they'll work with you on it and guide you through it. And I think an awful lot of people feel like they have to become experts on mortgages, and they're responsible for getting all the ducks in a row. And the reality is that a broker or the loan officer in the council will be more than happy to help and guide you through getting on the proper ladder. And the only other problem with getting a council mortgage is when you're a first-time buyer, it has the house you're buying has to be either a new build, or if you're building the house yourself. And
right. Because you can't buy a second. It can't be a second-hand house or an older house.
Oh, it can. I'm sorry. I'm thinking of the Help to Buy scheme. Yes, you can get a mortgage to buy a second-hand house from the council. Right. You can't. Sorry. Yeah. And this actually, one of the other problems we have is there's so many schemes now. It's like you couldn't possibly be on top of all of it at the one time,
does it take a long process, from start?
Yes.
It's a long process, isn't it?
Yeah. I would argue that it is just as long as going with a bank. You're talking about signing up to more than likely the biggest loan you're ever going to have in your life. It's a huge decision. It's a huge commitment. And I think sometimes, this is not anyway factual, but sometimes I wonder if part of the process of trying to get a mortgage is they want to see, they're nearly testing your commitment. Do you know? Okay, can you really save €500 a month for 6 months? Can you actually do it? Can you go without that money for 6 months? And another thing I think is really important as well. There's a lot of fear about people who have gambling apps on their phone, or people who have an occasional flutter on the Grand National or whatever, right? And I think lenders need to be a lot more honest about that whole situation. Absolutely, if you are gambling a lot of money every month, no lender is going to lend to you for obvious reasons, okay? Yeah. But if you have the Paddy Power app on your phone and you literally put 20 euros in January, and you're back in Cheltenham and the Grand National, and that's the only transaction you've had in that whole year, that's not going to be an issue, And I think you get people saying, "Oh, sure, I was refused a mortgage because I had the app on my phone." And I was like, "No, that cannot be the truth. The truth is they looked at your bank statements or they looked at your Revolut account, and there was at least a considerable amount of money being spent on the gambling app, and that's the reality of it." And I don't, I like an occasional bet myself without trying to promote it or anything, and I think it's one of the things that stops people starting the process. It's fear, and I just encourage people, go in, talk to the loan officer in the councils, find a broker, have the first conversation, and there's you just work the steps, and it can happen for you.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
really
yeah,
that's really interesting.
a very good point.
Thank you.
And Brian, I suppose, as I said, Carlow has 2 colleges in it. I went there for 4 years. Roisin went there, and to college in Carlow as well. It's a big part of the town and the county. Carlow IT is now C2, and St. Patrick's, I think, they may eventually come under the C2 umbrella as well. So, education, it's like another factory in Carlow town.
Absolutely, and people don't realise that the biggest employer in County Carlow is C2. It's a massive employer, and the fact that we can say now that Carlow is a university town, to some people that might mean anything, but that is huge, and especially if you're looking to attract international students, for whatever reason. But if you are a university, it makes a difference. It's a fantastic, and it's such a modern place. Like I remember being a teenager and driving down Green Lane and or Green Road. I always mix up Green Lane and Green Road, but the one on the pitch side is the college.
Yeah.
And like that was completely overgrown fields. It was a meadow, and then I did my Leaving Cert, and I did a year in the Institute of Further Education when it was next door in the vocational school, and I did media production and photography. We used to go next door every day and for lunch, and we'd use the canteen and all that. And even then, it was an impressive building. But that was back in 2007. Fast forward, 7 and 11 years, and the place is unrecognizable to when I was there. It's such an imprint, a fabulous imprint on the whole town, and from the soccer pitches, the GA pitches, the rugby pitches, the glass buildings. It's just it's an amazing. It's amazing for Carlow, and it's putting Carlow on the map in a lot of places.
Absolutely, and the fact that as university status, I'm sure you'll be hoping that can grow and it can attract more disciplines to Carlow, because with the whole C2 model, it will look like if you want to do computer science, you have to go to Carlow. If you want to do law, you'll be going to Waterford. It's kind of that's what it's looking like, because there's still a lot more bedding down of it, but overall the process has been good.
Yeah, absolutely, and there's the third campus in Wexford. Sorry, the dog is going mad here beside me. Is he going to come in?
All right.
No, he's going wild. The third campus in Wexford obviously is great, and I know Kilkenny are very eager to have a link or a base into the whole thing as well. But my younger brother, when we did our Leaving Cert together, and he went and did a year in Waterford in sports and recreation, and I remember driving down to Waterford before the motorway, and it was a good hour and a half or an hour and 3/4 by got through traffic. And now Carlow to Waterford, you're there in an hour 10, and it's
your motorway,
and it's the two places feel closer together, and I think 40 years ago it might have made sense for the two of them to be considered as part of the one. But they're so accessible now. It's incredible, and in fact, and then again, as I said, throw in the third campus in Wexford. It's incredible for the whole region. And it's actually one of the things people mightn't realize about councils is that you've got regional forums as well. And there was a really interesting forum that I chaired when I was Cathaoirleach 2 years ago, or year before last. So there was the First Citizens Forum in the southeast. So you had the Cathaoirleach of Carlow, Cathaoirleach of Kilkenny, Wexford, Waterford, and
Tip.
Tip. And once a month, we'd meet, and every year the chair would rotate, kind of like what Myshall and Leo were doing, and and it was an opportunity for, and the chief executives would meet as well. So there was 10 people in the room, and all the TDs and senators were invited as well. Now, I'll be honest, the TDs and senators weren't great for turning up. To be perfectly honest about it, partly because it was an opportunity for us to ask them questions, to push at the higher level to get funding for the region. So they tended to avoid it a little bit, but it was great to see some of the really big issues that were kind of county contained, but that actually had a knock-on effect to the region. So I'm going to get the numbers wrong now, but the the road from Kilkenny to, can't think of the number of it now. That'll tell you how important it was. But it was just like, in Carlow, we talked all the time about getting an IDA advanced factory, and we talked about all the things that were just important to Carlow. But when you see that, well, actually, Kilkenny have their thing that they're looking for nationally as well. Wexford have theirs, and it's a great opportunity to see that, if the region comes together and says, well, actually, we'll back Carlow on that, and we'll back Kilkenny on this, it's a much stronger argument to make then for be it funding or be it for resources,
Yeah, it's good because there's only so much resources to go around, so you have to be creative at times.
Yeah, definitely.
Brian, I'm curious. What inspired you? What inspired you to join politics? And when did you join politics? And what was your first experiences? I know it's 3 questions, but so what inspired you to enter politics, and when did you join?
I was diagnosed as insane 10 years ago. That was the main reason. No, I'll tell you exactly why. So I was studying journalism and visual media in Dublin, and I took a day off from college and I went down to Waterford for Rag Week, and I was having a good time on Rag Week, and the day before, as part of our course, we had to attend questions and answers. Remember the RT program before Katie Hannon and all that?
Yeah.
Questions. So, and as part of going on that program, the audience were allowed to submit a question. And I'll be honest with you, I robbed a question so we used to have a mock questions and answers in the first thing on a Monday morning in college, and one of the Norwegian students asked a really good question, and I nicked it that night in the studio, and I just asked her a question because we had a good debate that morning, and my question got pulled to be asked from the audience. So the question was in relation to there had been an attack, I think, up on the border, and the question I asked was the recent attack a risk to the peace process, and Mary Harney was on the panel, the Minister for Health at the time, and she answered the question. And anyway, long story short, John Bowman then came back to me and said, what do you think, Brian Donoghue? And I tell you, I muddled some answer out because I didn't know what I was talking about, to be honest with you. And so what's the connection between there and Rag Week? Following day, I'm down in Waterford at Rag Week, and then on a Wednesday morning, I was a little bit worse for wear, and I got a phone call from Pat Deering, a former TD for Carlow, and Pat, say again.
Oh yeah, that's right, yeah.
So this is back in this 2008, and Pat was thinking about running for the council. I said thinking about Pat was going to run for the council. So this was actually early 2009, and sure it could be February, that wouldn't it? Yeah. So he rang and he said, I saw you on questions and answers the other night. Oh, you did very well. No, he was lying. But anyway, he said, would you come and do some canvassing for me? And I said, yeah, no bother. Now, the other reason he asked me was because my dad had been a member of Fine Gael, never ran for election or anything like that, but through the connection to Richard Mulcahy, he'd been a member, and I think he was a branch secretary. But my dad would have always canvassed for Pat's dad at election time, and that was the extent of the political conversation in our house. Like, other than the news would be on, I never once heard my father saying, now when you grow up, you're going to vote Fine Gael, And my mum was from a Fianna Fáil kind of family. But anyway, a mixed marriage. But so long story short, Pat asked me to canvass with him. There was a connection there between his dad and my dad, and then canvassed 2009. Really enjoyed it. It was a great time to canvass for Fine Gael because at the time everyone was really angry with Fianna Fáil, and it was a really false baptism because everyone was just so pleasant on the doorstep. And then 2009 came. Pat got elected. 2011 he ran for the Dáil. I was gone on to college and doing media and stuff. And in the meantime, I was heavily involved in my GA club here in Rathvilly, and like really involved in anything that was going in the town. I was involved in. So then Pat got elected to the Dáil, and then my neighbour down the road here, Fred Hunter, was returned as a councillor, was co-opted for Pat when he got elected, and Fred did 2 years on the council or so. And then in 2013, I was chairman of the GAA club in Rathvilly. I was 25 years of age, and I think we'd applied for a grant or something, and I got a phone call from Pat, and said, "Can you call down to the house later?" And I said, "Oh God, we're getting a few bob from Sports Capital or something, So I called down to the house, and we talked football for 45 minutes. And at the end, he said, "Look, there's going to be local elections in next year, 2014, and you're involved in nearly everything that's going on in Rathvilly, and you're doing a lot of work. Why don't you try and make it official? Would you run for Fine Gael for the council?" And I said to him, "Pat, I don't know the first thing about potholes. I don't know a thing about planning permission, and I don't know anything about what it means to be a councillor or whatever." And he said, "Well, look, see, can you get elected first, and you learn that bit afterwards." And that was kind of how it happened. So to tie all those bits together, so you have the Richard Mulcahy connection, kind of to my dad, to sort of with immediate interest in how to ask questions and stuff, to the link to the local guy. Like if Pat Deering, say, had never got elected to the Dáil, if he was still a councillor, that door never would have opened for me, and that's kind of it. So sort of by accident, sort of by fate, and sort of by having a graph for wanting to do things in the community, and I suppose wanting to help people where possible,
And Brian, as we said, Simon Harris is the new leader of Fine Gael. I suppose you're in a local election. It's very, very different to, say, a general election or anything like that. People in Rathvilly vote for you because you're Brian Donoghue, more so than you're a Fine Gael councillor. But does the change leadership in Fine Gael, does that have an impact on the local elections for you and your Fine Gael colleagues across the country?
I'll tell you on the 8th of June. I'll tell you one thing, and I was, and I still am, a huge fan of Leo Varadkar. He was the most approachable, contactable politician I think I've ever met, considering the office he was in. Phenomenal guy, and I was really, really, really genuinely sad when he announced he was resigning. At the same time, with the position the party was in and very bad defeat in referendums, I can understand that he feels he's making the right decision. And Simon Harris, for as long as I've known him, and I've known him for 10 years, we campaigned together. He was running for Europe and I was running for the council for the first time round, and he was actually the TD for Carlow for Rathvilly.
Because Rathvilly was in Wicklow.
Exactly. So I would have I ran clinics and stuff for Simon, and we worked closely together. So now waffling. You asked me about it, the difference. Changing leadership will make a difference in the local elections. I think one of the differences it will hopefully make is that and you guys were at the Ardash, you've seen the buzz, a much bigger attendance.
Must have been over 1,000 people at it.
Yeah, there was. I think across the whole day there was 2,000 registered or whatever, and been on Sheehan using his Semple Stadium method for calculating the numbers at the actual leader's address. I think he said there was 1,200 or 1,400 or something at the leader's address, which is a huge crowd. So I think when I talk to colleagues and when I talk to some of the new candidates, Ben Ward and Catherine Callahan, and when I talk to Paul Doug and Fergal Brown and Tom O'Neill in Carlow Town and Tommy Kinsella and Michael Doran in Bagnallstown, when I talk to them now, you just a little bit of spark is there. There's a little bit of, I don't know what it is, but the flame is there. I'm not saying it wasn't there with Leo, but if it was burning that high with Leo, it's just gone to there now. And enthusiasm and wanting to knock on the doors is a huge part of helping you convince people to vote for you. So that's the difference, the immediate difference I think he can make. He's obviously going to be in Carlow on Friday evening, and I'm looking forward to seeing what he has to say. But I think he's realistic as well that it would be, if Fine Gael was to come back for a fourth term in government next year, is never like highly unlikely. And I think he wouldn't take on the leadership if he wasn't aware that that's a strong possibility. And at the same time, if he can deliver on some of the things that he wants to deliver on, and the people reward him and vis-a-vis the party accordingly, who knows? But I think Simon is there for the long haul. Leo famously said he didn't want to be in politics forever. I haven't heard Simon Harris say the same thing. So, hopefully he's able to do a good job. But I think, sometimes you talk to the opposition, and in the heat of politics, it can feel really personal and that. But genuinely, I don't think any person gets involved in politics without genuinely wanting to do good for the town, the county, the country, and it's never been more true with Simon Harris. Like, he's a genuinely good person. I mean, his entry into politics via campaigning for autistic services for his brother is as commendable as an entrance, possibly far more than mine, into politics as you'll get. And I think I'd love if the general public would give him an opportunity. And the first thing people will say is, but sure, he's been at the cabinet table for 8 years. I totally get that, but there's a reason why we have a Taoiseach. It's because it's a very important position, and you do get to steer things in your own direction. So I hope he's positive for not just for Fine Gael, but I hope he's positive for the country. And if he's positive for the country, that'll be good for Fine Gael.
Can I ask? You mentioned the referendum, and I have to ask this because I have to say I canvassed for the no. I did. I was out in the streets canvassing. Yeah. So how do you think, why and how did the government get it so wrong at the public feelings and opinions around the referendum?
I think, and it's my opinion, not backed up with any concrete evidence, I get the impression that the referendum seemed to be part of what maybe the Greens wanted way more so than the other two parties, but it was agreed with the programme for government, so it had to go ahead. And I don't think either Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil got behind it. And as I didn't canvass either way. I did a bit of an explainer just to try to give people the facts in maybe 2 days beforehand. And so I think part of the reason was government wasn't very united on it, and there was as little campaigning for a referendum that I've ever seen. And not that I've seen too many of them. I do also think that you had now I want to be very careful when I say this, not disinformation, but there was misinformation going around, and it became very, very emotive. people saying things like they're trying to take women out of the Constitution. Now, yes, absolutely, the word woman in that context, that word wasn't going to be in that part of the text. But I thought that was drilling down so deeply into the wording, and words are important. That's our Constitution, and I get that. And straight away, even now trying to talk about it, it became way too muddled. And if you want people to make a decision who are not usually interested in politics or not usually paying attention to politics and to the issues, and they want to be able to, half an hour before they go down, look at the argument and go, right, am I this way or that way? And if it can't be done in half an hour or even in 10 minutes, straight away, people are going to go, if I don't know, the answer is going to be no. And so the wording wasn't great. There was no campaigning, government not very united on it. And a combination of all those things then allowed for the little bit of misinformation. And I'm not for 1 second saying you were doing any misinformation or anything like that.
Don't worry, I won't take it personally. I know. Don't worry. Yeah.
But I think so 3 or 4 strands as to why it failed. Like my own brother and I went to town on another one night over the referendums, and one of his main points was that it was absolutely needless, that nobody was asking for it. And that's probably a very fair point now that I think about it, And I think as well, when I was growing up, I genuinely remember in schools, be it teachers or be it whoever, saying that our Constitution says a woman's place is in the home. Now, when you read the article of the Constitution, it actually doesn't say those words. It doesn't say that. It actually really it reveres women in the home. And where the wording is problematic is actually where it says that if she chooses to work outside the home, that she's neglecting her duties. That's what should have been changed.
Yeah.
And that's the fair point. And I think, I'd love to ask every single adult in Ireland, have they read the Constitution? And I say the percentage would be remarkably low, because they elect people to the Dáil and to the councils to do these things for them, and they got it wrong on that one, unfortunately.
Do you think then, you said about everybody reading the Constitution. Now, I lived in Africa, right? When we lived in Africa, we had to learn we went to American school in the compound my father worked, and we had to swear an allegiance to the flag. Look, I just said that just happened. Swear an allegiance to the flag every morning. And we had to then learn about the American Constitution as part of our school curriculum. Do you think should that be brought back into the educational system then? Just as you mentioned that about, has everybody read the Constitution?
We have a remarkable opportunity to do that through CSPE classes. And I think like when I was doing CSPE, there was pictures of politicians on the one side and names on the other, and you had to match the name to the thing, and it was the most childish. I didn't think it was an effective curriculum. Now, it can't have been too good a curriculum because I got an A in it, and if I got an A in something, I guarantee it wasn't hard. When I was Cathaoirleach in 22-23, one of the best days of the entire year that I had was when I brought a class of third year CSP students from St. Leo's down into the council chamber. And the first thing we did was have a mini election, and I showed them how the count works and transfers. And then we did a council agenda. But instead of having it on roads and actual budgets, we had an agenda based on school issues. So things like, should we get rid of the school uniform? Should every school have a 4-day week? And there was, some of them in the chamber were from the minute they came in, after being impressed by the screens and the cameras that turn and all that, after that they were like, okay, straight away I'm bored. But when the debate started about getting rid of the uniform and being able to wear what they wanted, right, there was one girl, I can still see her sitting there, and when I was in school, she would have been I would describe her as cool. She was just cool, and this was not a cool room to be in, right? But when the debate started around the uniform, like, she had things to say, and when she opened her mouth, she was incredibly articulate. And what the teacher said to me afterwards, like, we could have tried to have that conversation with them in the school setting, but they were down here in this council chamber feeling like they could actually make a difference. And once they felt empowered, all of a sudden they were interested. So my niece lived in America from 2016 to 2021, and with my brother, she was only like 6. And the two outstanding things I remember from talking to her about her elementary school was, number one, they used to practice for a live shooter in the school. And we had fire drills in Ireland, and they had, like, it just sounds so insane that they were training to get down and crawl under desks and things. And the other thing was the Pledge of Allegiance every single morning. And she can still, she's 14 now, and she can still recite obviously the Pledge of Allegiance and all that. But what I'm trying to come to is, if we're going to get people interested in things like the Constitution and get people interested in public and civic life, they can't. The first time they encounter politics or public life or policy cannot be when they first apply for planning permission, or when they first go to vote. It has to be made interesting. They have to understand that actually one person can make a difference, and be it a debate about school uniform, or be it a debate about the lunches in schools should be free, or whatever the case may be, they need to feel that they can make a difference there, so that they understand. And I think the knock-on effect could be that the young guy who is maybe struggling and is going to go out and cause vandalism in the town, maybe now realizes, oh, well, actually, Jesus, somebody probably actually came up with the idea and worked hard for that. Maybe I won't write my name on this wall or something. And don't get me wrong. Do I think every single girl who was in that chamber, do I think every single one of them left absolutely inspired? No, of course not. But if you only got one of them, one person, it's enough. Now, that I'm not. I love every teacher I ever had, bar maybe one, I absolutely loved. Right. So I'm not trying to take that gift that teachers have to give to students, but for such a potentially boring topic that is politics, I think the way we do it has to be a little bit different. You can't teach politics the same way you teach maths. It has to be done, show them the real world, and that's kind of my theory on it,
Yeah, be interesting though, because I never read the Constitution. Have you, Paul?
I have it at home. I remember during the 2011 presidential election, they were all waving it around saying Constitution. I said to myself, I may get it and have a look. So I have it, and I flicked through it. So, but I haven't read it cover to cover.
Yeah,
neither have I. Neither have I.
So Carlow, so you're in politics 10 years.
Yeah.
What has changed for you, in your perspective of what has changed in politics for the positive and the negative? So 2 questions again.
Good question.
Oh, what's changed for the positive? That's really hard to know. One of my biggest issues with getting involved in politics is very quickly a little bubble forms, and it only gets to about that size, right? And so I went from the guy who told Pat Deering that I didn't know how to fix a pothole, to the guy now who can explain why the pothole is there, and the reason why it hasn't been filled is because we need funding. And do you know what I mean? And straight away you're the kind of poacher turn gamekeeper type thing, right? And so it's with that in mind, it's difficult to say what's changed positively, because I nearly forget what it was like and what the difference, the difference that you've made, And then when I sit down to maybe do up leaflets or to do up letters for a housing estate or whatever, and I start listing off the projects that have gotten done over the 10 years, you kind of go, wow, that's actually that's what you've impacted. That's what's helped. But then part of me kind of goes, yeah, but like what Ray Keane would say, but it's your job. You did your job, And I wanted to be, and I still want to be, a councillor at all times who like, I don't just want to be a reactive councillor when someone rings and there's a problem and you go fix the problem. I want to be driving like new projects and driving new things. Like one of the things I got criticised for recently was there's a really successful bike scheme in Carlow Town in Kilkenny, like phenomenal success. And there's a traffic problem in Tullow. And I said, well, maybe we should pilot a few bikes in Tullow. If it only took 10 cars off the road at the busy times, it might help. And you know, people to jump on you and be like, no, there's no need for bikes in Tullow. And like, okay, but yeah, let's try these things. Like, I'm not afraid to fail on those things. So when I look around at Carlow at the positive changes that have happened, one of the shining examples is the Brawn factory, the old Brawn factory. For most of my life, unfortunately, as you head into the town, and if you're coming from the Kildare side, like, you can see the Brawn building from so far back, you know, and it was just brown elephant as you came into the county town for so many years. And now driving into Carlow and it's beautiful green building and even the name Nua on it, it just not to simplify it too much, but that symbol of Carlow that's there now as you enter the town is a real indication of how the whole it's a real example of the knock-on effect that's happened around the whole county, you know.
But then you've got that coming in from Carlow's side, and then the other side you've got the situ.
Yeah.
On the outside.
Yeah. MSD as well, which is a phenomenal, massive employer as well.
Massive, absolutely massive. And you know, and don't get me wrong, I wouldn't want anyone to be able to take a clip of this and be able to say, look, I don't know who's saying that the best thing about Carlow Town is the Brawn site. Of course I don't mean that, but it's a symbol of, like, the Brawn site was a symbol for years of dereliction and forgottenness and kind of everything that was wrong. And now that that's regenerated, the fact that somebody's seeing value in that site again means that there's value in Carlow again. That's a really good thing, you know. In terms of the negatives, it's getting to be a cliche at this stage. People talk about social media and saying about the whatever. I mean, the only difference really, right? When we were younger and you'd be watching Ireland in soccer and Eamon Dunphy would be on the screen and he'd be making some outrageous point. And somebody in your house would go, oh, there's that effing Eamon Dunphy. I hate him, right? Now, they didn't hate Eamon Dunphy. They hated what he was saying, okay? But the thing was, we didn't have a forum in our thumb where you actually got to type those words and say it to the world. You only got to say it to your front room. And really and truly, I think all that's happened with the negativity around social media is that now you're saying I hate him and Dunphy to the entire world. And then you think you're saying it to the entire world, but like Mr. Cosgrove found old tweets of mine there a couple of years back, where I was having a back and forth with some of my college friends, and I used some unfortunate language. I didn't think it was absolutely dreadful, but I used the word SLUT, and perhaps I was raised better than that, blah blah blah. But anyway, it was retweeted out of context, and whatever. And when I tell you the absolute barrage of tweets, my phone got hot with the barrage of tweets I was getting, more or less saying like, "Oh my God, you're a disgrace, you're a disgrace, you're a disgrace." And for 2 days, I was going around like literally avoiding people and going like, "Oh my God, like everybody knows this is happening, right?" And that was, say, I think a Thursday. And on the Saturday morning, I was playing around the golf with my three brothers. And we got to the first tee box, and I hadn't seen them. And normally we'd be texting every day. Hadn't been talking to them at all. Got to the first tee box, and one of them said, "You all right?" And I said, "I'm sure. I suppose you've seen." And they were like, "Seen what?" And they had genuinely no idea this thing was happening, right? And so on the one hand, I'm saying people are now putting their thoughts out to the whole world. And when it's something bad, the feeling can be the whole world is seeing it. But really and truly, there's so many people on social media. Your singular thought does get thrown away. Now,
yeah.
When you're a politician and you say it, it can come back to haunt you. Of course it can.
But is that kind of could you say that's kind of going back to the whole bubble thing? Because when you're
Yeah.
in politics, you're in a bubble.
Yeah, absolutely. That
brings me on nicely to the next question. You don't want me to ask. The hate speech bill, that would be connected to the hate speech. Do you think will it go through? Are you getting many questions at the door about the hate speech bill?
Not yet. Not yet. I'm sure it will come up on some doors. When that was first drafted and I was going through the Dáil, I remember having a brief look at it, and I could see no major problems with it. I was like, that's absolutely fine. Like, it makes sense. I mean, protect minorities and all this. And then my brother, who I famously debated with about the referendums, got on to me. He was like, if that hate speech bill goes through, he said, I will riot. And I was like, well, hold on. What do you think? And he was like, I forget who made the quote, but it was, I may not like what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it, and this kind of thing. Mm. And one of the politicians I really admire at the moment is Senator Barry Ward. He's a senior counsel outside of politics, but he's a really articulate guy and really good on the law. And I've listened to him doing a couple of interviews now, and when you listen to Barry, and he points out that free speech still protected in the Constitution, even if this thing goes through. Free speech even within this bill is still protected, and the central point of the hate speech bill is to be able to prosecute people who are inciting hatred and violence. And so, there's a trans person on the street. My reading of the bill is, if I go over to that person and say, I don't think you're a man, or I don't think you're a woman, and the fear is that that person can then say, oh, hate speech, ring the guards, and I get arrested. I don't think there's any logical person could say that is hate speech. It might not be nice, but where I think the line is, if I say, here lads, everybody get around, let's go over and tell that person they are a man or a woman, until they are whatever, and let's beat them up, or let's get that person, right? Huge difference. And I think that's when I read the bill, I see that as being the difference. Now, I know everyone's going to ask the question, how do you define hate? And I don't know the answer to that question, but I do think, ordinary decent people probably have an idea of what hate is. And I have a colleague at work who says, no, look, it's a slippery slope. If you start trying to police language, you're going down. And I was like, but it's not trying to police language. It's trying to stop the people who want to inflict violence and hatred, and I get his point. Where does the line stop? In answer to your question, will the hate speech bill go through? I think there'll be amendments. They'll either have to remove the word hate from it, or they'll have to try to define it. I think there'll be amendments, and I think some version of it is definitely going to go through. I don't think it's going to go through in its current form.
And probably not during this government, probably. Or do you think it might go through with this government?
It all depends on how long you think this government's going to last, and I don't know if it'll go all the way to March. So I think if it's going to go through, the government's going to have to last until March. By the time
some talk that you could see the budget brought forward maybe towards the latter end of September.
I'd support that. I'd do that, and let's have an election in October, no problem.
I said to Paul that would happen, but 2 years ago, I said, won't go. Didn't I, Paul? 2 years ago, won't go.
Yeah.
And Paul said, no, will it will? I said, I bet you it doesn't. It won't go past 2024.
Well, both Leo Varadkar and Micheál Martin said that they did not favour another winter election. So, when you look at again, back to our constitution and when the election has to happen, the latest date has to be March. So you could argue it's a late winter, early spring election, and they both said they didn't want that. So the only alternative option to avoid an election at Christmas and to avoid an election in the early part of winter is to have it in September, October. So I still think that's when it's going to happen. And I think if the locals weren't happening on the 7th of June, we'd be having a summer election. I've no doubt in my mind. And part of the reason that we can't have a general is because there's so many candidates who are either running, say Kathleen Function in which Sinn Féin running in the South. I better mention John Mullins as well. Go on, John. And Sean Kelly. But if she was to get elected to Europe, there needs to be a by-election. But are you really going to have a by-election between now and between July and March, and then have a general?
There's a couple of and Barry Cowan is running, and Peter Dobin could potentially win a seat too as well. So then that's potentially 3 by-elections there.
Yeah. And if you're going to have 3 by-elections, Simon, head out up to the Irish, good man.
Yeah.
So
and would you reckon?
Sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
Just get one last question in. And would you reckon, Brian, that Fine Gael will probably have all their selection or candidates? They'll probably be wrapped up before September anyway.
Oh yeah, I think that the plan is to have them. Who did I hear saying it? I think the plan is to have them done by July or August. Yeah, so there's another indication, And it's no harm. On the one hand, it's no harm to have elections relatively close together, because I suppose people are used to politicians calling to the door, where sometimes if you leave it 4 years and all of a sudden you're nearly trying to get people back into the habit of
we haven't been in ages kind of thing.
Oh, and like
we only see at election time.
I love when lads say that to me, because it's like, okay, so should I spend my time making sure that once a month I get to every single house in the area, and if I'm going to do that, do you know how much time I'll have to spend? Forget about going to council meetings, forget about actually trying to fill your potholes. Like, I'll spend most of my time just trying to talk to you.
Yeah.
So Brian, have you never had any ambition to go for the national politics for TD?
I know I do. I suppose my closest friend in politics was the TD when I came on. Pat, myself, very close, and he was the TD from 2011 to 2020. I know he still was talking about putting his hat in the ring again. If he decides not to, I'll absolutely be hoping to do so. And at the same time, if
that's to run a Kilkenny and a Carlow candidate.
Yeah, but I have to make sure I can win a council seat first of all. If I don't win that, I'd be going nowhere, obviously. But no, it's something I would love to do. I think I could really make a difference, and but it all depends on. Look, maybe the party wouldn't want me to run. Maybe one of my colleagues, maybe Ben or Catherine or Fergal or Tom or Paul or Michael or Tommy could get a brilliant vote, and maybe their star could be on the rise, and maybe it could be their time first. But no, it's something I would love to do. Absolutely, yeah.
Well, Brian, we're coming to the up to the top of the hour, so maybe speak to your voters now in your constituency and tell them why they should vote for you.
Well, hello, voters.
2 minutes.
Oh, excellent. Hello, voters in my constituency. I've been your councillor now for 10 years, and I have worked as hard as I can, not just on your issues, but on things that I think are important for our area. If you can show me your support this time round, some of the things I really want to focus on in the next council term are moving the focus slightly from not just meeting our social housing targets, but to zoning more land for private houses, so that everybody who wants to put a roof over their heads, regardless of their means or their income, that everybody has an opportunity to get a roof over their head. One of my other huge plans for the next council term, if I'm looking to be re-elected, will be to start clamping down more strongly on illegal dumping. Our roadside hedges and ditches are absolutely thronged with rubbish, and the more community cleanups we do, the more people seem to be littering. And Carlow County Council has made incredible strides over the last 10 years in trying to tackle that, and I think it's time now we move on with more modern technology and we really start to spend the valuable money we're spending on cleanups on better and bigger projects in our county. I also really want to focus in the next 5 years on helping people to get their planning permission. There's a huge story out there at the moment that it's impossible for people to get planning permission in rural Ireland. That is not the case. the vast majority of planning applications that go to Carlow County Council actually do get approved. Yes, it can be hard. Yes, you might have to make tweaks. You might not get the pink round house that you wanted to build in the first place, but you can get planning permission, and I'm very eager to work with people on that. And the other thing I really want people who may consider voting for me to know is that I will never make a decision that just suits me. I will make a decision based on what is best for an area, for a town, or for a county. And whether it's making sure that our footpaths are improved, or making sure that the funding that we get to do town renewal plans, or whatever it is, that it's spent as best as it possibly can, and that we have a better Tullow Municipal District and a better county and a better place to live. So please, on the 7th of June, give your number one vote to Bod.
Very good.
Oh.
So I like that, bod.
Yeah, some people might say bod is God.
Oh.
One of my cousins told me to get a magnet for the side of the car and call it the Bodmobile instead of the.
Paul, just explain to our viewers before we go that that 2 other candidates were invited, and we do know that
we invited Councillor Willie Quinn, Labour Party councillor from South Kilkenny. Unfortunately, Willie had technical difficulties, but we appreciate Willie taking the time to try make contact with us, and we'll certainly have Willie on again. And we invited Councillor Fintan Feenan of Fenagh Fall from the Carlow Municipal District, but he wasn't available.
Perfect.
So Brian, very sorry.
They're 2 good guys, so I wish them well.
Thank you, Brian. Brian, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the Irish Political Roundup. I know we met once in IT Carlow when I was studying there, and at the societies, and I set up the Labour Society in IT Carlow, and then the table. Somebody didn't turn up from the Fine Gael, and the priest came over and said, "You're going to have to go." And I said, "Oh, well, a girl and another student in my class, his mother said she was Fine Gael, and we phoned her, and she came down to that." So yeah, funny. It was only until I said to Paul, "I think I saw him before."
I hold a few records. The only time I've ever been sent off in any sport was when I was sent off in a volleyball match, and the only thing I've ever been thrown out of, apart from a pub, is Carlow IT that day. So yeah, and great idea for the podcast, and really enjoyed it, and the very best of luck with the rest of it. Thanks a million.
Thanks for taking the time, Brian. Appreciate it.
Pleasure, guys. Thank you.